800 million people depend on it for survival. It grows in soil where nothing else will. It survives drought. It survives floods. It survives neglect. And when the harvest comes, they take the root. They boil it. They fry it. They turn it into flour that feeds villages, cities, entire nations. But there is another part of this plant, a part that grows above the ground, a part that contains something the root does not. Protein. Not a little, a lot. More than most vegetables you have ever eaten, more than the root itself, more than many foods sitting in supermarkets right now with fancy labels and high prices. And yet, across most of the world, this part of the plant is thrown away, cut off, left to rot in the fields, fed to animals if anything at all. 800 million people grow this plant, and almost none of them know what they are discarding. This is not a new discovery. This is not a laboratory invention. This is something that has been eaten for generations in the places that understood it, and ignored everywhere else. Tonight, we open the vault on the part of cassava nobody told you to eat. Welcome back to Shock Slice. If you are new here, this is where we uncover the foods that history buried, the ones that fed civilizations and then vanished from memory, the ones that science validated and markets ignored. Tonight, we are not talking about a rare plant from a remote mountain. We are talking about one of the most common crops on Earth, a crop that feeds nearly 1 billion people, a crop you may have eaten yourself without knowing its name. Cassava. But we are not here to talk about the root. The root has had its moment. The root is famous. The root is flour and starch and tapioca pearls and chips and fufu and 100 other things. We are here to talk about what grows above that root. The leaves, the stems, the green growth that farmers cut away and discard before the harvest. Because inside those leaves is something the world desperately needs, and almost nobody is paying attention. Let us begin with what cassava is. Cassava is a root vegetable. It originated in South America, likely in the region that is now Brazil. Indigenous peoples domesticated it somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 years ago, long before wheat, long before rice reached most of the world, long before the crops we now consider essential. When Portuguese traders arrived in the 1500s, they recognized something immediately. This plant was resilient. It grew in poor soil. It tolerated drought. It required almost no care, and it produced enormous amounts of calories per acre. They took it to Africa, and Africa adopted it faster than almost any crop in history. Within a few centuries, cassava became a lifeline. In places where rainfall was unpredictable, where soil was exhausted, where other crops failed year after year, cassava survived. It became the difference between famine and survival for hundreds of millions of people. Today, cassava is the 6th most important crop on Earth by production. Nigeria alone produces over 60 million metric tons per year. The Democratic Republic of Congo, Thailand, Indonesia, Brazil all depend on it heavily. But here is the part that matters for tonight. When farmers grow cassava, they wait 8 to 24 months for the root to mature underground. During all that time, the plant produces leaves, green, broad, abundant leaves, and in most places, those leaves are seen as waste, a byproduct, something to clear away so you can get to the real harvest. This is a mistake, and the numbers prove it. Cassava root is almost pure starch. It provides energy. It fills stomachs. It keeps people alive when there is nothing else. But nutritionally, it is limited. Very little protein, very few vitamins, almost no fat. This is why populations that depend heavily on cassava root often struggle with protein deficiency. The calories are there. The nutrition is not. Now look at the leaves. Cassava leaves contain between 20 and 30% protein on a dry weight basis. This is not a small number. This is comparable to many legumes. This is higher than most leafy greens by a significant margin. Spinach has about 3% protein. Kale has about 4%. Cassava leaves have up to 10 times more. But protein is only the beginning. The leaves contain iron. They contain calcium. They contain vitamin A precursors, the compounds your body converts into the vitamin that protects your eyes and immune system. They contain vitamin C. They contain B vitamins. In a single plant, growing in poor soil with minimal water, you have both energy from the root and nutrition from the leaves. A complete system. A survival package designed by thousands of years of evolution and human selection. And yet, across most of the cassava growing world, only the root is valued. Only the root is sold. Only the root is processed into the products that reach international markets. The leaves are left behind. Not everyone ignores cassava leaves. In fact, some cultures have eaten them for as long as they have grown the plant. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, cassava leaves are called pondu or saka. They are pounded, cooked slowly with palm oil and spices, and served as a staple dish. In many Congolese households, a meal without cassava leaves is incomplete. In Indonesia, they are called daun singkong. They are stir-fried with coconut milk and spices, served alongside rice and other dishes. In Padang cuisine from West Sumatra, they are a standard part of the meal. In parts of West Africa, the leaves are dried, ground, and added to soups and stews. In the Philippines, they appear in traditional dishes under the name kamoteng kahoy leaves. In these places, people understood something that modern agriculture forgot. The plant is not just a root. The plant is a system, and you eat the whole system. But when cassava spread to new regions, when it was adopted by populations who had no history with it, only the root came along. The knowledge of the leaves stayed behind, and generations grew up never knowing what they were missing. This is not a conspiracy. This is not suppression. This is something simpler and in some ways more frustrating. This is how agricultural knowledge travels. When colonial powers moved crops around the world, they moved products, not practices. They moved the part that could be stored, shipped, and sold. Cassava root can be dried into flour. It can be processed into starch. It can be turned into tapioca. These are commodities. These have value in markets. Cassava leaves are perishable. They wilt within hours of harvest. They cannot be shipped across oceans in the hold of a cargo ship. They do not fit into the supply chains that were built to move commodities from colonies to capitals. So the root became the product, and the leaves became invisible. There is another factor: processing. Cassava contains compounds that can release cyanide. Both the root and the leaves contain these compounds. In the root, proper processing removes them. Soaking, fermenting, drying, cooking, traditional methods developed over thousands of years make the root safe. The leaves also require processing. They must be cooked thoroughly. Pounding helps break down the compounds. Boiling and discarding the water removes more. The cultures that eat cassava leaves know these steps. They have known them for generations. But when cassava spread without its cultural context, the knowledge of how to safely prepare the leaves did not always follow. And in the absence of that knowledge, it was easier to simply throw the leaves away. This is how food knowledge dies, not through malice, through disconnection. Today, cassava is grown on every tropical continent. It is researched by agricultural institutions. It is modified by scientists. It is optimized for yield, for disease resistance, for drought tolerance. But almost all of this research focuses on the root. When you search for cassava nutrition studies, You find hundreds about the root. You find discussions of starch content, glycemic index, cyanide processing. You find breeding programs aimed at improving root size and reducing root toxicity. Studies on cassava leaves are fewer. Funding for leaf research is limited. The assumption, built into the system over decades, is that the root is the product, and the leaves are waste. This creates a cycle. Because research focuses on roots, extension programs teach farmers about roots. Because farmers learn about roots, they optimize for root production. Because markets want roots, processors buy roots. And the leaves continue to be discarded year after year, generation after generation. Meanwhile, protein deficiency remains one of the most persistent nutrition problems in the regions where cassava is grown most heavily. The solution is growing in the same fields as the problem. And the system is not designed to see it. Climate change is making agriculture harder. Rainfall is becoming less predictable. Droughts are becoming more common in regions that once relied on consistent seasons. Soil in many areas is degraded from decades of intensive farming. In this context, cassava becomes more important, not less. It is one of the few crops that can produce meaningful calories in conditions that would destroy wheat, corn, or rice. As climate stress increases, cassava acreage is likely to expand. But if cassava acreage expands and only the root is used, we will have more calories and no more nutrition. We will fill stomachs without feeding bodies. We will solve one problem while ignoring another. The leaves offer a different path. Imagine a system where cassava farmers harvest leaves throughout the growing season, not just roots at the end. Imagine drying technologies that preserve leaves for storage and transport. Imagine local processing that turns leaves into powder, into flour additives, into nutritional supplements made from something that currently rots in fields. This is not fantasy. Small-scale versions of this exist. Researchers in some institutions are working on exactly these questions. Entrepreneurs in a few places are experimenting with cassava leaf products. But the scale is tiny compared to the opportunity. The funding is minimal compared to the need. The attention is almost non-existent compared to what it should be. And this is perhaps the strangest part of the story. We live in an era obsessed with superfoods. Every year there is a new one. Acai from the Amazon, goji berries from China, spirulina from laboratories, moringa from wherever moringa comes from this season. Billions of dollars flow into marketing these foods. Supplements fill shelves, powders fill smoothies, influencers fill feeds with promises of nutrition and vitality. And meanwhile, a leaf with more protein than spinach, more iron than kale, more potential than most of these trending ingredients, sits in fields across the tropics. Unpicked, unprocessed, unknown. Not because it does not work, not because it is not nutritious, not because people would not eat it, but because no one can patent it, no one can brand it, no one can build a supply chain around something that wilts in a day and grows in places without refrigeration. The market is not designed to value what cassava leaves offer, and so the market does not see them. But you can see them now. If you live in a region where cassava grows, the leaves may be available in local markets, in African groceries, in Asian supermarkets, in Caribbean shops. They appear sometimes fresh, sometimes frozen, sometimes dried. If you find them, know that they must be cooked thoroughly. This is not a salad green. This is not something to eat raw. The same compounds that require processing in the root require processing in the leaves. Boil them, change the water, cook them with fat and spices the way traditional recipes instruct. And if you do not live near cassava, if these leaves are not available to you, then simply knowing this story matters, because the way we think about food shapes the way food systems develop. The questions we ask determine the research that gets funded. The products we demand determine what farmers grow and what they discard. For too long, the question has been simple. How do we get more starch from cassava roots? Maybe the question should change. How do we get more nutrition from the entire plant? How do we value what is already growing? How do we stop throwing away the answer to problems we claim we cannot solve? 800 million people grow cassava. The roots feed them. The leaves could nourish them. One of these facts is celebrated. The other is barely known. Now you know both, and that is where tonight's vault closes. If this changed how you see a plant you thought you knew, subscribe. Share this with someone who cares about food, about farming, about the things we overlook in plain sight. The vault will open again soon. Until then, look closer at what grows around you. The answers are often hiding where no one thinks to look.